Around 2,300 years ago, on a beach near Athens, a man knelt in the sand and watched everything he owned wash up in pieces around him. His ship, gone. His cargo, a fortune so valuable that kings competed to buy it, at the bottom of the sea. In one night, one storm, he went from one of the richest merchants of the Mediterranean to a man with nothing but wet clothes. He had no way of knowing it that night, but this shipwreck would change human history. Because years later, when someone asked him about the disaster, this man smiled and said something almost impossible to understand. "My most profitable voyage was the one I lost everything on." He wasn't being poetic. He meant it, mathematically, literally. And by the end of this story, you'll understand exactly why. Because if you've ever lost something big, a job, a business, a home, a person, this man discovered what disaster is actually for. Before we set sail, comment below. Where are you watching from? I read every single one. His name was Zeno, and he came from Citium, a trading city on the island of Cyprus. Zeno was born into wealth, and he multiplied it. His family traded in the single most valuable substance of the ancient world, a dye called Tyrian purple. You have to understand what purple meant back then. It wasn't just a color. It took thousands of sea snails to dye a single garment, which made purple cloth worth more than its weight in gold. It was so expensive that in many kingdoms, only royalty was allowed to wear it. When you sold purple, you didn't sell to markets. You sold to palaces. That was Zeno's cargo. That was his life. Sea routes, contracts, profit. By his early 30s, he was, by the standards of his time, a rich and successful man with a clear future. And here's the detail that matters. Zeno's wealth was exactly the kind we all chase. Movable, countable, stored in a hull, in coins, in cargo. The kind of wealth you can point at. The kind of wealth a single storm can take. Remember that, because tonight, the sea is going to ask Zeno a question most of us spend our whole lives avoiding. If everything you own disappeared, what would be left of you? Somewhere off the coast of Greece, the storm found him. Ancient sailors had no forecasts, no radio, no rescue. When the sea turned, you survived it or you didn't. Zeno's ship didn't. The hull that carried his entire fortune broke apart, and the purple dye of kings dissolved into black water. Zeno survived. He washed up near Piraeus, the port of Athens, with nothing. Let me put his situation in modern terms because he lost his cargo sounds too clean. Imagine your bank account, zero. Your business, gone. Your home, unreachable, an island away, with nothing to sail back for and no reason to return as a failure. Your identity, the successful merchant, dissolved overnight into the shipwrecked foreigner. What do you do on that beach? Really, pause and ask yourself. Because everyone answers this question eventually. Maybe not with a ship, maybe with a layoff email, a locked door, a divorce paper, a diagnosis. The storm changes its shape, but it comes for everyone. Zeno did the only thing left. He stood up and walked into Athens. Not because he had a plan. He had no plan. He was a man in salt-stiff clothes walking into a foreign city, carrying the one thing the sea couldn't confiscate, the next hour of his life. And in that next hour, something happened that no shipping contract could have predicted. Wandering the streets with nowhere to be, Zeno drifted into a bookshop. Think about how ordinary that is. The most important moment of his life. And it's a broke man killing time in a shop he can't buy anything from. The bookseller was reading aloud. The book was about a philosopher who had lived 100 years earlier, a man named Socrates. And as Zeno listened, something in him went quiet. Here was a man who had owned almost nothing, and no storm, no court, not even a death sentence had been able to make him poor. His wealth was somewhere ships can't sink. Zeno stood in that shop, a man who had just lost the first kind of wealth, listening to a description of the second kind. And he asked the bookseller one question, maybe the best question anyone has ever asked. Where can I find a man like that? The bookseller looked up, pointed out the door at a shabby man walking past, and said, "Follow him." The man was Crates, a philosopher famous for owning nothing and needing nothing. And Zeno, the merchant prince of purple, walked out of the shop and followed a beggar. That decision, made on the worst week of his life, is the reason we know his name. But Crates saw Zeno's real problem immediately. It wasn't the lost fortune. It was shame. Zeno was still a rich man in his head. He cared desperately what people thought. He walked like a man apologizing for existing, the walk of someone who used to be somebody. So Crates gave him a strange assignment: carry this clay pot of lentil soup across Athens. Lentil soup was poor man's food. For a former merchant of royal purple, walking the city holding it was humiliating. Zeno tried to hide the pot under his cloak. So Crates smashed it with his staff. The soup ran down Zeno's legs in front of everyone, and as Zeno stood there, dripping and burning with embarrassment, Crates said calmly, "Why run away? Nothing terrible has happened to you." Nothing terrible has happened to you. Zeno looked around. The laughing strangers, none of them could actually touch him. The soup, it was soup. The shame, it existed in exactly one location, his own mind. The storm had taken his cargo, but this was Zeno learning that the second fortune, the unsinkable one, is built by giving up the terror of looking poor, looking foolish, looking like a failure. The lesson took. Slowly, the merchant died, and something else grew in his place. 20 years later, if you walk through the center of Athens, you'd find a crowd gathered at a painted porch, in Greek, the Stoa Poikile. Teaching there, every day, free to anyone, Zeno of Citium. The school he founded took its name from that porch, the Stoa. We call it Stoicism. That's right. The philosophy itself, the reason this channel exists, the ideas that would guide slaves and generals and emperors for 2,000 years, exists because a cargo ship sank. No storm, no stoicism. And now his strange sentence makes sense. My most profitable voyage was the one I lost everything on. He wasn't coping, he was doing accounting. The shipwreck cost him one fortune and paid him a greater one. It forced him off a comfortable road he would never have left voluntarily, and onto the road he was actually built for. Athens, the city he'd washed into with nothing, came to love him so much that when he died, they voted him a golden crown and built him a tomb at public expense. An immigrant, honored like a founder. And centuries later, his shipwrecked philosophy reached a crippled slave named Epictetus, and a betrayed emperor named Marcus Aurelius, the man whose story we told in the last video. The emperor who forgave his traitor learned how from the merchant who blessed his storm. Every disaster in this chain became a doorway, which raises the only question that matters. How? Because you will have a shipwreck. Maybe you're in one right now. Here are the 3 moves Zeno's story teaches, the actual mechanics of turning loss into a beginning. Move 1. Count what the storm couldn't sink. The night everything falls apart, your mind runs a loop of what's gone. Break the loop with a different inventory. What survived? Your skills survived. Your mind, your health, your ability to walk into a new city. Every lesson the old life taught you came through the water with you. Zeno's trading discipline, his languages, his judgment of people. The sea took none of it, and all of it later built the Stoa. You are not starting from zero. You are starting from experience, minus baggage. Move 2. Walk into the bookshop. Notice what Zeno did not do. He didn't rage at the sea. He didn't hide in a room replaying the storm. He wandered, but he wandered toward the city, and when he heard wisdom, he moved closer and asked, "Where can I find more of this?" When your life collapses, your next chapter is almost never inside your house. It's in a room you've never entered, a course, a library, a conversation, a craft. You don't need the whole plan. You need to place yourself where better ideas are and ask one good question. The plan finds you there. Move 3. Carry the lentil soup. The biggest thing keeping people trapped after a loss isn't the loss, it's the shame of being seen in it. The downgraded car, the smaller flat, the job application at 45. So they hide, like Zeno hiding the pot under his cloak, and hiding keeps them stuck. Crates' cure still works. Deliberately do small things that embarrass the old you. Take the modest job without apologizing. Tell people plainly, I lost the business, I'm rebuilding. Every time you survive being seen, the shame loses a finger of its grip, until you're free to rebuild in public at full speed, caring only about the opinion of people who matter. Remember the words, nothing terrible has happened to you. One warning, because this story gets misused. This is not everything happens for a reason. The storm had no reason. The sea wasn't teaching Zeno a lesson. The sea doesn't know he exists. The meaning wasn't in the shipwreck. Zeno built the meaning afterward with 20 years of work. Disasters don't hand you a better life. They hand you an empty beach and a choice. 2 men, 2 disasters. An emperor betrayed by his best friend. A merchant robbed by the sea. Neither got to choose what was taken. Both chose what came next, and history remembers them not for what they lost, but for what they built on the far side of losing it. Your storm will not feel like a doorway while you're in it. Zeno's didn't either. That night on the beach, he was just a ruined man in wet clothes. The doorway is built later, by you. So here's this week's question, and read the comments on this one because they will move you. What was your shipwreck? The loss that, looking back, redirected your whole life? Share it below. Your story might be the exact thing someone else on their beach needs to read tonight. If this story reached you, the like button helps it reach the next person standing in wreckage. And if you missed the story of the betrayed emperor who learned from Zeno's school, it's on screen now. Next time on Stoic Fables, a man born a slave, his body owned, his leg broken by a cruel master, who became freer than the men who owned him, and taught emperors what freedom actually is. Subscribe. You don't want to miss Epictetus. Until then, the obstacle is the way.